unschooling movement, but I also really like the idea of having learning centers and places where young people can come together in a non-coercive learning environment. And so our next speaker, I'm going to get his name right, it is Krzysztof Zajaczkowski.
Wow!
Pretty good. And he's going to tell us about the learning center that he has created in Scotland. And I won't waste any more time. I'll just give the floor to him. Here you go.
Thanks, Jim. One of the things that we do at school is to start every day with, I'm directly involved with the teenagers really, but one of the things we do for the whole school is start the day with movement and then singing. So it's like 15 minutes of each. The movement starts off with mindfulness exercises, and they're basically just being conscious of gentle movement and shoulders and face, muscles, the whole thing that you know about mindfulness, settling in. And then we do coordination movements, which wake the students up, give them a bit more vigour, and then the singing, choral singing, 3/4 part singing, amazingly beautiful. Students come in, often they can't stand singing. Within 3 months they're just loving it because of the way it's introduced, and that kind of opens their hearts up to the day. The breathing, the pulse, the breath and the pulse, and the mood of it all. So I'm just wondering whether we can do a little bit of movement and a little bit of singing. Is that okay with you guys? Yeah. And I'll try to not kind of intimidate anybody with the movement, so we'll do it really. And listen, this movement took me a long time to learn, so please don't feel bad if you can't do it. The other thing is, the theme of it is synthesizing 3 elements into one. Both with the singing, with the movement, and with my presentation on craft-based education. So it will be synthesizing 3 elements into one and making a kind of cohesive whole, making connections with the world that are disparate, but finding meaning and purpose in that, for you guys, especially when you're traveling, trying to find a cohesive thread throughout what you're doing. And the other thing is, yes, all the kind of self-development work that you've been presenting, I am there with it. I've been doing it for 30 years, Scott Peck, and amazing stuff with Eckhart Tolle, meditation. So when I do the presentation, it'll sound very pragmatic and practical and earthy, but I'm there with you on that journey, continually loving all this self-development and progress with the soul. So just to put things in context, so let's just stand and I'll try to guide you through this movement as slowly and sequentially as possible. So let me just do it first of all, once through, and you'll see how it goes. No, sorry, let me do it through once. It's all right. I'm going to just slow it down now. Good. Good. You okay with that? Good. Last time. Anybody not got it? Mm-hmm. Got it. Second time. Brilliant, brilliant. Third movement is really difficult. It's syncopated. But don't worry, because what I'll ask you to do is just choose which group you want to be in. So people who are very used to rhythm might join me with the third movement. Let me try get it. So let me just slow it down and I'll make some sounds with it as well. I'll just make some sounds to help you. Cha-cha, cha-cha, cha, click, click, cha-cha, cha-cha, cha, click. And the feet are alternating, so we'll slow it down really slow. Let's try. Cha-cha, cha-cha, click, 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 yeah. And cha 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 click click cha cha click click step hard cha cha click click last time How many people got that? You can join me. Now, so first ones go over here. Other ones here, and then the ones over here. Complicated ones with me. This one is running sharp. So let's try this. Now, I'm going to lead you in that if you're getting lost with it, just face each other. Because when you see other people's rhythms, they'll put you off. And when you feel that you've got it, start to face the rest of the group. Okay, so who's really confident here doing that one? Who's really confident? Adam, you're confident in it?
Because he's his present, he's so good at that.
Click.
Come on.
No.
Go ahead.
Bum cha click click bum cha click click bum chum 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 chum. Good. Keep going and look at each other.
Ignore that.
It's a bit too fast, sorry. Bit too fast. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh yeah, sorry, go.
Okay.
Bum cha click click. Bum, click, click, bum, cha. Oh, I've lost it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. which is quite easy. We'll also break it into a round of 3. It's Da Pacem Domine. That's all it is. Da Pacem Domine, the peace of God. And it goes Da Pacem Domine, Da Pacem Domine, Da Pacem, Da Pacem. That's it. So let's do the first. There's 3 blocks there. So let's do the first block. And it's just the 2 lines repeating each other. Da Pacem Domine. Let's do it. Da Pacem Domine. Da Pacem Domine. Let's try that again. Slower. Da Pacem Domine. Da Pacem Domine.
I don't like that.
Try to keep it on the same note. 1, 2, 3.
Da Pacem Domine, Da Pacem Domine.
Next bit goes Da Pacem,
Da Pacem,
again.
Da Pacem,
Again.
Da Pacem,
Put those 2 lines together.
Da Pacem Domine, Da Pacem Domine, Da Pacem.
Good. Third line hits the top somewhere. Da Pacem, Da Pacem. Again. Da Pacem. Once more. Da Pacem. Last time. Da Pacem. We need 3 singers for 3 groups. So we'll have a group here,
Sing it for people, stop it.
and then we'll have a group, say,
I'll go with them because I'm the bass.
1, 2, we got it. So, I'll sing it again through once. Let's sing it together once. Da Pacem Domine, Da Pacem Domine, Da Pacem, Da Pacem. Got it? One more time.
Da Pacem Domine, Da Pacem Domine, Da Pacem, Da Pacem.
So you listen to Adam. Strange, they both got strange accents. And Dorota, listen to Dorota. And you guys listen to me. So I'll tell you when to come in. You go Da Pacem Domine, Da Pacem Domine, and then we go Da Pacem Domine.
Could have followed me.
And then Da Pacem. So
3/4 harmony. Right.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Da Pacem Domine, Da Pacem Domine, Da Pacem Domine, Da Pacem, Da Pacem, Da Pacem, Da da pacem Domine, da pacem, da pacem Domine, da pacem Domine, da pacem Domine, da pacem Domine, da pacem, da pacem
Wow. Lovely. Beautiful, beautiful. So we'll try, this is again going to be quite a practical, it's quite location based, but I'll start quickly with my journey, just so that there's a bit of personal connection. And so I was very location based, living on the farm for 21 years in Yorkshire. I'm a Polish Yorkshire man living in Scotland, speaking in Mexico. 21 years on a farm, very, very stable, location based, and I have to say that I'm here learning so much from you folks to bring back to my school, which needs kneading into a bit more flexibility. It needs kind of loosening up. So I'm really here to learn from you rather than me teaching you anything, so that I can take back some a little bit more adaptability into my school. So I went to a Roman Catholic school all the way through, and got asthma, childhood asthma, missed lots of school, therefore got behind in maths and sciences, never caught up, and that idea of becoming bad rather than stupid, that kicked in a little bit. Got into lots of fights, and then got into arts and crafts, because in arts and crafts you don't really need to have that sequential mathematical brain. So my right brain developed a lot, and I don't think I have a left brain cell that's working, actually. It's terrible. So got left school, refused to do my exams. I was put in for 6 O-levels, refused to do them. Last minute, a beautiful, the only female teacher in the school said, "Why don't you just try them? Try them, you nothing to lose." So for her I did it. For her I took those exams. I'm very fickle that way. And amazingly I passed the 6, which got me into art college. And then in art college we started in a band, lots and lots of rock bands, about 7 bands that I was in, and did not so well at art college because I was focusing on trying to be a rock star, and that never really happened. Sorry? Oh yeah, well eventually, the strange thing is that I went into a television shop about 1977, and on one television was the Sex Pistols playing Anarchy in the UK, and all of us with like hippie hair and beads and flares, we were like, oh my God, what is happening to the world here? It was like this Dickensian urchin kind of wrapped around the mic stand, and we had tingles up the spine. Next day all the hair came off, narrow trousers, and I absolutely adored, even though the Pistols were from south of London and we were way up in the north of Yorkshire in farming country. There was no connection there, but for me something was happening there, like a revolution, where young people were taking the power back from the music industry, super groups, you know, that were inaccessible. So there lies a little bit of the correlation between you guys. I would say you're punk schoolers. You know, taking back the power to the people. Punk rock schooling. But amazingly, a couple of years later, I ended up roadieing for the Sex Pistols. So that was amazing. That was just like a complete fluke of chance. Meanwhile, art college finished. I went into advertising, graphics, film, commercial art, and then got out of that quickly because that seemed a bit of a rat race. And then found a job teaching unemployed teenagers graphics, photography, and screen printing. And that was such a fantastic job, best job I ever had to date. Working with inner city youth, just getting them jobs in art and photography and printing. But they were quite emotionally kind of disturbed, some of them, and I just thought, then, education is the key to the world's problems, education, and get it at source. And ever since, my focus, or not my personal focus, but my intellectual focus, has thought the younger the better. The younger the more important it is for great education, you know, because they're kind of the soft, malleable, impressionable. And then a friend told me, my art college lecturer phoned me and said, "Have you heard of Steiner education, Steiner Waldorf?" And I said, "Never heard of Steiner." And my boss at this place said, I'll put my feelers out, I'll check it out, what is Steiner about? And he came back the next day, he says, "Oh, they're the teachers who think they're right and everybody else is wrong." I did end up there for 30 years. So I've been in Steiner education for 30 years. I went to visit a class, quickly to see a class working, a Steiner class, sat at the back, and the lesson was so beautifully orchestrated, choreographed, and although it was rows and rows of desks, but it was seamlessly artistic. And I thought, I've got to have some children. Didn't even have a partner. I've got to have some children so they can go through Steiner education. So I had 3, and the three went through to start to graduate. Eventually, I got a job in a Steiner school in Scotland, near Findhorn, and the teacher takes them through from class 1 to 8, from 7 years old to 14, and you're kind of like their third parent, and you teach them everything, really, art, music, so you have to be kind of a Renaissance person. And I took my class through with my own daughter in there, which was, you know, thankfully it was graceful and fine with my daughter. And then we emigrated to New Zealand, where I went to the first high school that I'd experienced as I'd always been working in lower schools. So I went to New Zealand and learned there. I went to art school again there, but I was teaching woodwork and movement. Woodwork and all kinds of woodwork, building timber frame, round log buildings, pizza bread ovens, making ovens out of clay, knife making, forging knives, and building Canadian canoes. That was my speciality. Canadian canoes, pizza ovens and knives. And that was really great fun. Now, then I got a phone call from one of the parents of the school I've been teaching at, whose children had just graduated to 14, but there was no high school for them. So, coincidentally, My stepdaughter had been in that class, her class. My biological daughter was in that class. The other co-founder of Drumduan, an architect, his 2 children were in that class, and Tilda's 2 children were in that class. So there was a connection there. But she phoned me and said, would you be the head teacher of a new pioneering style Steiner school? Let's drop the old rigid dogma and try and make it much more fluid and flexible. And would you be a head teacher? And I said, I don't have a left hemisphere. I can't organise a piss up in a brewery. And I said I could never do it. You know, I'm a woodwork teacher, and I can't even take the register for these young people. And she said, no, you're the right person. You're the right person. So the amazing story, my most amazing story, isn't it? I went to the shopping mall in New Zealand. Now, if you draw a line from Scotland through the centre of the earth, you couldn't get any further away from Scotland than New Zealand. But I went to the shopping mall to buy a recorder learning book, because inside the schools all the young people play recorder. I thought, I've got to gen up on recorder. I thought I won't find a recorder book, it's just a bit random. But in this bookshop, bargain bookstore, all new books but cheap, there was a recorder book, spiral bound, about this big, that thick, had a big half-price sticker on it. I peeled the sticker off, and there was a photograph of that very class that I was to take. You get this? The very class, that Tilda's class, that wanted a head teacher, a new teacher. There was a photograph of it in New Zealand of them playing recorder. And I was like, what the hell is going on here? My mind was sort of twisting about, wondering which country I was in. It was basically because photographs had been taken years back of them children, that class, and it had been sold to a photo library, and a New Zealand company had bought that photograph of that very class. So a bolt from the blue, from God, and I said yes, and came back to Scotland and started this new school with 7 boys and 7 girls that was going to be self-directed learning, less rigid, but still using the Steiner curriculum, which really places an emphasis on an equal emphasis on the intellect, the academic, an equal emphasis on the practical, crafts, building, movement, and an equal emphasis on the heart, the artistic, colour, painting, singing, dance. So really, an equal emphasis. Head, heart and hands is the motto, really. And I'm going to have a short of time, so I'm going to just zoom on to the oh yeah. So we were starting the school, and pre-inspection government inspectors came, and they said to me, so we know the Steiner schools, they all do exams, they all do testing and qualifications, so you'll be doing all that, yeah? And I said, no, we won't. No testing, no grading, no exams. And he said, oh, that's unusual, because they all do that, the Steiner schools. I said, well, we want the system to change to fit in with us, not us to fit in with the system. And he said, well, you're pushing at an open door, things are happening. So it was very hopeful. Then they came back when we were running after a year, and they were inspecting what we'd done so far, and they were in another room deliberating what marks we should get. And we've been singing this choral piece that was much more complicated than what you've done. It was like 6 parts, and I said, let's go into their room, to the office, and sing to them. So we burst in, and there were these inspectors, and we did this amazing spine-tingling thing. There were tears in their eyes. And afterwards they said, absolutely amazing. Here's a card we bought, a greetings card in the village. Great times ahead, Drumduan. Here's a £5 for the coffee that we drank. It was completely unlike the Gestapo Nazi type inspection we'd had before. They said, "Is there anything else before we go?" I said, "Give us a hug." So we had a big hug with the inspectors, you know. So anyway, now I wanted to go on to the ethos and encapsulate it, if I can, in the knife making and the pizza oven and the canoe. So basically, I would say to you, or to the students, somewhere in South America, some iron ore gets mined. It's smelted, it's fabricated into a car spring, high carbon, very hard steel, flexible, and it's fabricated and it's fitted into some car. We don't know which car, but a certain car has this certain spring. Maybe it's a BMW owned by Mr. and Mrs. Jones, and they drive it about, and we don't know how many speeding tickets they got, we don't know how many accidents they had, but it has its own biography, this spring. Eventually the BMW gets past its lifespan. In that, by the way, in that high carbon steel, we can talk about metallurgy, physics of suspension. We could talk about the car industry. The students can dip in where they like on that, according to their passion. Could be physics, chemistry, car production, anything. Then that car spring, I go to the scrapyard, take the car spring, oily, rusty. The girls and the boys take it and heat it in a forge that they've made themselves, under a shelter they've made themselves. Chop a piece of the car spring out about this length and that thickness. Bash it flat on an anvil, then bash it into a long biscuit shape and the rough shape of a knife with a tang on it. The tang is the sharp piece that goes into the handle. They work it, they sand it, they drill two holes for the pins that go through the handle. A lot of work, a lot of health and safety issues, but they're there bashing this red hot iron. The girls also loving it, and then we go to the acorn that fell off the tree in California somewhere on the American white oak. It fell, or a squirrel takes it away, buries it. It grows into a massive oak. An oak tree, by the way, in Blenheim Palace in Britain is 1,047 years old. So we can talk to the students about what happened in that span of that oak tree's life. You know, the Crusades, the Norman conquest. The tree is home to microbes and right through to bees. The whole diversity of an ecosystem can be studied by those students. That tree eventually is felled, cut into timber to create bourbon barrels, your bourbon whiskey. 25 years, we can talk about distillation, about drink. Then that bourbon barrel, after it's used, goes to Scotland, where we are, with lots of distilleries, and reused for another 25 years. Those bourbon barrels are scorched inside. The oak is very hard, it's very slow growing, and it has tannins in it that give flavour to the whiskey, but even more flavour when it's burnt inside for 40 seconds and charred. And also the chemistry of the sugars in the wood help create the perfect whiskey. So we can talk about dive in where you like, guys, along this biography with the students, and take what you want out of it. Then the bourbon barrels, when they're used, in Scotland they're sold, the staves, are sold for firewood. And it's beautiful wood. It's almost a shame to burn it, but outside each cottage in Scotland you'll see stacks of this whiskey smelling bourbon whiskey barrels. We take it, slice it through on a circular saw and start to form a knife handle out of it. So there's a second biography coming into the first biography. The third biography is some cow living somewhere, either free range or factory farmed, I don't know. Eventually it's slaughtered, it's tanned, its hide is tanned. We can talk about ethics of agriculture with them, talk about tanning and the chemistry in there. Originally skins were tanned by using the brain of the animal and rubbing it into the skin. It has the perfect constituents for tanning, has a brain. So all that can be talked about. Then the students make a sheath, embossed, stained, and it makes a beautiful sheath. So eventually they have this fantastic looking chrome finished, almost not chrome finished, but chrome like finish of a car spring that's turned into like a Bowie knife with an oak handle in a sheath. 3 biographies, and what's most amazing is that they've brought together, like you brought together the 3 elements of the movement and the singing, they brought together the mineral kingdom, the plant kingdom, and the animal kingdom, and the human kingdom brings them all together, like you did. So it's a kind of synthesis of learning. Same with the canoes, 16-foot Canadian canoes. We built 7 of them. It takes about a year for each canoe. In New Zealand we built 3, and they were only used once. These beautiful, they're stunning looking canoes, red, yellow, blue, primary. The paddles carved out of slabs, single slabs of wood, of Douglas fir. We used them once in New Zealand, and there was a fire in the woodwork shop, burnt all of them to a crisp. But that also has its multidisciplinary learning, the physics of buoyancy, the measurement and the maths involved is phenomenal. Thousands of measurements. If you get a millimetre wrong at one end, you're going to get a big differential at the other end. So, yeah, aesthetics of colour, buoyancy, the chemistry of epoxy resins goes into it. So again, the students can dip in where they like and pull out their certain interest. In the school we have a week called Outdoor School Week, where we build structures, proper structures around the school grounds, permanent, like a bandstand or a tree den. And we involve the 7-year-olds through to the 18-year-olds, so they all mix and match all week, building these structures. And my kind of thing is these pizza clay ovens, and you can get English involved in there, a haiku about fire, the art, the dragon that's formed around the entrance of the pizza oven, maths, of course, parabolic curves. They're quite an advanced thing for upper school students. Parabolic curves, the strongest curve that you can get. So we have to work out a parabolic curve for the oven. And meanwhile, the children have to puddle the clay, tread it in a big pit. They're covered in clay top to bottom, and they're all holding each other's shoulders, little ones, big ones, and totally getting covered and loving it. And one 7-year-old looks up at me and he said, "Krzysztof, this is the best fun I've ever had." And then a school shy guy, all he wanted to do was to do basketball, hated school, and he looks at me and through gritted teeth he said, "Krzysztof, every school should be like this." So that was really lovely. That kind of bookended children from 18 to 7. And then of course they've got the nutrition, catering, cooking for the pizzas. They'll learn all that involved there. Let me just see what else there is here. Yeah, this is another little story, if I can give you. On our school grounds there's a lawn. No, I'll go back a bit. Our school hill overlooks a bay, Findhorn Bay, stunning views and we've got 7 ecosystems within sight. Heather moorland, heather like heath moorland, the biggest pine conifer forest in Europe, which has become a nature reserve, Canadian type forests and rivers within view of the hill, dune lands, sand dunes, pebble beaches, sand beaches. So that's our school hill. It's got the best view in Moray. It just so happens the witches, in inverted commas, the wise women as we call them, wise women of Scotland, were burned on that hill. But it, strangely enough, has the most immensely peaceful presence. So we've had fire rituals there to kind of redeem that burning. Instead of a stake, we've done circles like polo mints, circles of fire with beautiful singing on the hilltop. And we do our movement on the hilltop every morning. So it's a great place. That's where the pizza oven is. But on these grounds, we had a lawn that had poisonous laburnum growing. So I said, let's cut it out, this laburnum, and get rid of it. But there's all the turf, the lawn to use. So we had a hexagonal swing frame, children's swings, that was obsolete. So we put a roof on this massive structure, a conical roof, and we got the lawn, and we put it on the roof. So turf roof shelter, and in there was going to be the blacksmith shop. Then we got the rhododendron that was swamping the grounds and turned it into charcoal, another science. So we had loads of charcoal. Then where the big patch was missing of lawn, we planted a willow bed of 5 or 6 different colours of willow for willow basket making. Then we cut down some sycamores and turned them on a greenwood lathe. That's a lathe that's used without electricity, with a treadle, making handles, tool handles. So we cut down the sycamores, the maples that were in the way. They're like weeds in Scotland. So rhododendron became charcoal, sycamore became tool handles, turf became roof, the bare patch became a willow bed, and then we got the charcoal and started heating metal up to form a spike tool that's used for basket making. So do you get that kind of whole circular thing returns to the baskets? The whole thing is integrated learning. It's not disparate or fragmented. Everything is connected to making that tool, including chopping down rhododendron, maple, woodland management. So the other thing we do is called the Washington Project, and we stole that off YouTube. In Washington DC there was a high school that was really self-directed learning, and we kind of distilled it into a smaller version we call the Washington Project, and all the students know what the Washington Project is and that it was borrowed. But basically it's that the students, upper school students, they on the Monday they have to come in with a question. It can range between why does a boiled egg float to what's the nature of consciousness. 2 examples of what they chose. 35 students, lots of questions they come with. They share their questions on a Monday. Tuesday and Wednesday they go do research on that question. The first time they did it, we didn't allow them the internet. Really difficult. You have to phone a friend, find an expert, read a book, but that is expecting a lot. So the subsequent Washington projects that they did. So each first group isn't allowed internet use. So they research it Tuesday, Wednesday. On Thursday they have to present their question, their conclusions, their findings of their curious question to the rest of the group. So they're teaching each other, hardly any teacher input. And then on the Friday, it becomes the kind of left brain thing. They have to formalise it, write down how they did it, what they learnt, how it felt to them. So the self-evaluation. So basically, upper school is very crafts, hands-on, movement-based, and we get through the university problem by creating these, I have to say, superb portfolio packages where they've got their knife, they've got film of the canoe being made all year, theatre, drama performances that they've done, like they did the Crucible, Arthur Miller's Crucible, because of the witches, also connecting to the witches on the hill, and the. But anyway, they can film all these things and create a portfolio. And the thing with Steiner schools, they have this thing called main lesson books, and they're basically artistic journals that go from 7 years old to 18. But by the time they're 18, those journals, handwritten, hand illustrated, if you opened them, you would not sometimes distinguish between a printed book, or a handmade journal of scientific illustrations, colour, beautiful script, handwritten script, and then we leather bind those books with Celtic knotwork around, so they're stunning. And then they've got a what they call USB stick, little pen drive with all their work on, and of course they are very articulate and confident, like all these guys out here are, and they're very able to shine. And the universities were saying, look, we officially can't allow your students in to our university without qualifications, but look, through the side door it may be possible. So out of 16 graduates last year, 8 of them chose to go to college and university, and they got in because we have a friend in Oxford University who's on admissions, and he said, between you and me, we are sick of A, B, C, D grading. We want to see the light in their eyes when they walk into the interview, and the smile on their faces, and how they present themselves, because intellectualism is kind of becoming obsolete, but creativity, expression, lateral thinking, diversity. I've spoken to company managers on top companies saying that how disappointed they are with the level of versatility and creativity they're getting in their company interviews for new students. They said they're giving us the answers that we expect rather than something different. So yeah, I just thought, how do we encapsulate Drumduan's ethos, which is still too fixed. I want the Drumduan to be maybe like a hub for your families, maybe to kind of like have centres where they could travel the world and say, you can come for a month and make a knife, or and learn some science, English involved in that. That would be my dream, like a summer school where families can transit in and out. And our school is still what I call the industrial paradigm. It's like a small grey cube, and that is politics now, and in a sense relationships as well. It's Industrial Revolution model, small grey cube, and I want to see it expand our school into a transparent, large, semi-permeable sphere. So, and we're somewhere, you know, I think you guys are kind of quite large and semi-permeable because you're roaming the sphere actually. And for me, I'd like to that's why I'm here, to learn from you how to hybridize your travelling ethos and what I think for us is still too desk bound. Because I say to parents coming to the school, you know, that somebody said it yesterday, that shape of a right angle of a chair, this and this, to sit like that, you know, for 10 years of your life in school, it's like a right angle that doesn't belong in nature, and to sit being kind of spoken at, it's a cube mentality. And when children are completely fluid, responsive, flexible, adaptable, and that's what I'm struggling with, even my school, to try inculcate in the teachers. Let go of the classroom, go outside, go into nature, class trips. Am I past time now?
We don't care. I'm trying to give you the 10 minutes.
Okay.
So you have like 5 left now.
Okay, so
No, you got 5.
pottery and forge work, willow basket, wood carving, horticulture and wild foods, bread making. We were making bread, our own bread and soup every morning in the school. So it was actually movement, singing, and lunch and bread making. And then we would, we only had one room, and that one classroom in a day, it was a boat building yard, and then with everything out, chemistry lesson, everything out, drama, all in one room, just change. It taught them kind of adaptability, but it was quite stressful, and still a little bit regimented and divided. But so bread making, leather work, and bow making, and making our English longbows, shelter construction, bookbinding, joinery, beekeeping, building a Canadian canoe, Tai Chi and movement, copper work we never did, bushcraft and survival skills, forestry, woodland management, charcoal production, and then we had one day per week that was dedicated for total outdoor pursuits. So every single day they went out to do canoeing, orienteering, or caving, or climbing, or tightrope, or snowboarding, sailing, abseiling, mountain biking, or archery. So that was a day, always on a Friday, but every day there was some craft work, so that they weren't sitting down for too long. You had to get up and move. Anyway, when we had our inspection, I forgot about that. I was invited to see the Queen. Honestly, the inspection went so far, and I thought it was a joke, so I threw the paper away on my desk. I thought it was a joke that they invited me to see the Queen. And then somebody found it and said, Krzysztof, this is real. You've only got 2 days to respond. So I went, because it's
Queen. I mean, why not?
I'm an anti-royalist, and I always say I was within spitting distance of the Queen. Well, Sex Pistols and all that.
Exactly. We got the reference.
Yes.
Save the Queen.
But then the Guardian newspaper came, and because one thing led to another, and we were on a class trip in the the Western Islands, and a Guardian reporter came, that he was living in Brooklyn, New York, and he flew over and he wrote this article. Now with Steiner articles, 9 times out of 10 you give an interview and then it's turned around to be these cookie wacky, airy fairy, woolly, cultish people. So it was a massive risk, because the Guardian, you know, it's millions online abroad, and so we kind of crossed our fingers and allowed this Guardian reporter to come on a class trip with us. And he came, he fell in love with the students, and he said, "This is just the best thing that I should have had when I was a child." And he wrote this article. It went on the front page of the Guardian magazine, about 5 or 6 pages, loads of photographs, and from then on it was like madness. We almost had to close the school down, because for about 7 days it was like the emails were blocked, telephone lines, film companies, radio stations, book publishers, newspapers, Der Spiegel, what's the other big German newspaper? Yeah, that's right. And so they were all wanted interviews, and we just said no to all of them. We said we need to focus on creating quality in this pioneering school, because if we're getting more children coming, it's got to be good enough for them to. But it also generated lots of travelling families who came. International students came. It was a real challenge to be so fragile an entity, and then to have to deal with such big publicity and influx of lots of students who were not familiar with the Steiner curriculum. And I was talking to some people yesterday, and how could we hybridize it, because, you know, the travelling family has to be aware that they might come in on the last week of a play production that's been rehearsed for 2 months, or a project that's coming to a close or in the middle of one. So these are the logistic problems that I would love to share with you all, and I think we should finish there, unless you've got any questions. Well, this is amazing, because the summer camp thing has been our dream since we started, and Tilda is especially keen on having a summer camp on this hilltop with teepees and yurts overlooking this great big bay. And a summer school idea was shelved, but I still think that it would be the perfect bridging point for our school and your kind of nomadic, beautiful kind of travelling creativity.
So about how many kids are at your school now?
Okay, so the lower school, the primary, it's only got capacity for 140 maximum, and it went down to 50 when it was failing, and then when we took over, we kind of reinvigorated it, we injected it with some adrenaline, and then it grew to about 135 in the high school. But we are struggling under the pressure of keeping the vision going, because I've got a vision that's a bit like yours. Desks are controlling, they're cheap, you don't have to pay for a class trip, you don't have to pay for going out climbing or snowboarding, so it's very economical to keep children inside a grey cube. As soon as you go out, it starts to cost money, and that's the difficulty. Sorry.
So can I just throw out some brainstorming ideas that you can just take or leave? Okay, so I'm not an educator, and as someone new to this idea of world schooling, one of the big challenges for me is how to try to create some structure, have some kind of plan, use all the wonderful world that I'm being exposed to in some kind of constructive way without, being too directive.
Yeah, too fixed.
So when I was hearing you, I was thinking, what if you used your knowledge to help parents like me to build curriculum? Maybe even the students who've gone through your program, the graduate students, could be assigned to a family that's saying, okay, I'm going to go spend 2 months in Costa Rica in the spring, and these are our interests. How can you help me to make use of that time? And that would be free, no hard cost to you. That's just a consulting fee or whatever. But you're still bringing your skills and your knowledge to people who can really use it, because that's how I'm really lost.
Isn't it great?
Like a technical assistance center. And that could be money generating that would help the school by being able to translate the knowledge that you've gained to parents that are thriving and looking for it.
I just wonder, because one last thing about the forge work. When I learned the forge work myself, I went to my back garden. Instead of a blacksmith's workshop, I went to the scrapyard and asked for a rusty block of steel that was about a square foot. Plonked it down, dug a little hole in the back lawn, lit a fire in it, one of those pumps for airbeds, to get the bellows going. So a cheap little pump, that is a bellows. The block of steel is the anvil, some long-nosed pliers for the tongs, and I recreated the same object that I'd been taught in a massive, kind of multi-faceted, equipped workshop in the space of 2 square meters and a hole in the ground. So it is possible to downsize all these great big things. I mean, the building a canoe is different, but you can build a coracle. I've done that. Coracle is much simpler. It's a circular boat with just a so it's a great. We shouldn't divert off that idea though. The Guardian article. I've only got 5 copies of the Guardian article. That's black and white here, and another article about the school. The 5 copies that went to from another magazine. But I would love you to see these knives, and I've got a PowerPoint presentation of only about 10 images of the knives, the canoes, and the clay oven. I'll leave these here. These aren't as good as photos of the knives, and the sheaths aren't as good, but